Hey all, it's Matt, your average gamer, and this is going to be my top 8 dexterity builds for Elden Ring. Soon I'm going to be re-optimizing some of these builds and making a video for each damage stat, and then kind of reorganizing the channel a bit. I can't wait for that, and honestly I can't wait to get into this one. It's a really good video. And the first one up here at number 8 is Hand of Malenia, which is a really good weapon. However, the Ash of War kind of has a very long animation. We ended up using Blood Boil Aromatic here for 10% more damage than Flame Grant Me Strength, and I was able to take Moog down before he even phased. An impressive weapon with great dex scaling, no doubt, and very high AR. I think it has the highest AR for a katana. Fantastic for physical damage as well. The Ash of War can be quite good. Let's jump into equipment for this one. For equipment, we have the Hand of Malenia plus 10. Any seal will do. You can check out the armor set here. You don't really need the Raptor's Black Feathers, Shard of Alexander, Rotten Wing Sword Insignia, Ritual Sword Talisman, Melissen's Prosthesis. We have the Thorny tier, Faith tier. I was using Blood Boil Aromatic, and that's Moog's Shackle to stun him. And for stats, we have 60 Vigor, 22 Mind, 28 Endurance, 16 Strength, 75 Dexterity with Melissen's Prosthesis. We have 25 Faith with the Faith tier. That's going to allow us to do our buffs like Golden Vow. And if you want to use Flame Grant Me Strength, you don't want to farm for Blood Boil, but Blood Boil is 10% more damage. And at number 7, we have the Lightning Bandit build. Now, with the Lightning Affinity, even though it gets a C in Lightning Affinity, you're going to get over 700, around 700 AR on each of the Bandit Curved Swords at rune level 150, which does massive damage and a lot of lightning damage. This is definitely no doubt one I recommend trying too. It has similarities with Jump Attack Bleed builds for sure, but that being said, it's a nice alternative that allows you to do lightning damage and take advantage of Lightning Slash. By the way, you need to switch to two-handing the offhand one first and then go back to the original one so you can proc both in a second here. We're going to go over equipment. And for equipment, we have 2 Bandit Curved Swords in Lightning Affinity with Lightning Slash. Any seal will do. We have the Raptor's Black Feathers on, Rotten Wing Sword Insignia, Lightning Scorpion Charm, Claw Talisman, Melissen's Prosthesis, Lightning tier, Faith tier. Let's jump into stats for this build. And for stats, we have 60 Vigor, 22 Mind, 28 Endurance, 16 Strength, 75 Dexterity with Melissen's Prosthesis, 25 Faith with the Faith tier. We're using Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength to buff this. Howl will give you about 5% more damage because it also boosts the lightning damage for this build. And the next one up here is the Raptor's Talons at number 6 in Keen Affinity. They're really good. They have a unique R2 flip that I like a lot, and you can get a lot of bleed build up if you add Blood Flame Blade. And if you're going for heavy affinity, Bloodhound's Claws will be better. On Keen Affinity, by the way, the Hook Claws are great too. I didn't end up using the unique R2 flip for the Raptor's Talons here, but I really like that ability, and it can build up on successive attacks as well. Maybe I'm being a little bit biased towards this weapon here over the Hook Claws, because I think the Hook Claws will give you more AR in general, but I just really like the style of the Raptor's Talons, and I like them in Keen Affinity. I've been using them a lot, but you can switch and use the same exact build with the Hook Claws, maybe get a little bit more physical damage. By the way, all the footage in this video is on New Game Plus 7, Journey 32 actually, so all the bosses will have the maximum HP they will ever get, and Commander Niall can be a little troublesome here because he is fairly slash resistant. There's actually an epic fight with the big dragon later in this video. I'm not going to spoil anything for that. He's got nearly 40,000 HP, and we end up fighting him with my number 1 build on this list. But that being said, Commander Niall can be a little bit of a pain. I was able to dodge his lightning kicks for the most part, but he hit me probably more than he should have. Now, he's not actually that bleed resistant. You can absolutely obliterate this entire fight, by the way, with Mogman's Sacred Spear. If you ever check my top video list, you can absolutely destroy Niall, even on New Game Plus 7, with minimal effort. That being said, the slash resistant part makes it more difficult. He is rather weak to bleed though. Yeah, just the boss in general, that's pretty much a pain for most builds. Now if you're doing something like a caster build or you're far away, it's much easier, but fighting him melee can be tough, especially for me. I find him one of the tougher bosses in the game in terms of melee builds, but that being said, we were able to get him down, take him down, and move on. And for this, we're going to jump into equipment, stats, and everything you need to know. I missed the Consecrated Snowfield, skip the easy one, but we have the Keen Raptor's Talons. You don't need the Shard of Alexander. I was using Bloodhound Step, so you can replace that one. Rotten Wing Sword Insignia, Melissen's Prosthesis, Lord of Blood's Exaltation, Thorny tier, Faith tier, any seal for buffs. Let's talk about stats. Now, there's 2 different sets of stats. The one that I use, Hellish Shabiri, when we get to 33 Faith, and the ones that I don't. So some of these stats are going to be similar. That being said, we have 60 Vigor, 22 Mind, 28 Endurance, 75 Dexterity, 25 Faith for the Faith tier. And then it allows us to do buffs in which we're using Golden Vow, Flame Grant Me Strength, and Blood Flame Blade to get a lot of bleed build up, around 100 bleed and very fast. And for the next build here at number 5, we have Spinning Weapon. This one's incredibly fun to use. It really goes well with the Grave Scythe, but the Grave Scythe does best in heavy affinity. Here we have it on the Nagakiba. I recommend trying this one out if you just want a good time or to have a lot of fun, because it gets a ridiculous amount of bleed build up, and it's just fun spinning your weapon around in general, and you also get decent physical damage with the successive attack damage on these builds as well. By the way, not sure if I mentioned it yet, but I did an early game guide for the Grave Scythe and Spinning Weapon. I'll attach that in the description below if you haven't seen that yet, or if you're new to Elden Ring, definitely check that out, although that one is a strength build. We're going to jump into equipment and stats here in a second. For equipment, we have the Nagakiba in Keen Affinity with Spinning Weapon. We're using Bloodflame Blade, any seal for buffs, White Mask, Shard of Alexander, Rotten Wing Sword Insignia, Melissen's Prosthesis, or Ritual Sword Talisman, Lord of Blood's Exaltation, Thorny Tear, Faith Tear. Let's jump into stats for this one. And for stats, we have 60 Vigor, 22 Mind, 28 Endurance, 16 Strength, 75 Dexterity with Melissen's Prosthesis, 25 Faith with the Faith Tier, and then for our buffs, we're going to be using Golden Vow, Flame Grant Me Strength, and Blood Flame Blade. This one could do a lot of physical damage as well as a ton of bleed buildup. And the next one up at number 4, we have Giant Hunt or Impaling Thrust on the Nagakiba, but for this one I wanted to show off a Keen Guardian Sword Spear with Giant Hunt and how much damage you can do. You can also do some decent posture damage as well. This is a really good one. I definitely recommend trying this one out for just general damage and the fact that Giant Hunt is relatively quick. I do like Lion's Claw better for strength builds, but Keen Guardian Sword Spear with Giant Hunt, you can't go wrong. You're going to get a lot of damage, as you can see here, and it comes out relatively quick, and I think it does around 35 to 40 poise damage too. Keep in mind, by the way, we're on New Game Plus 7 here, which is max scaling, meaning that they'll have about 30% more posture. All of the enemies, bosses in the game will have around 30% more posture, making posture breaking a little bit more difficult. In a second here, we're going to go over equipment, stats, and everything you need to know. For equipment, we have the Keen Guardian Sword Spear with Giant Hunt on it. Any seal for buffs will do. You can check out the armor set. We have 51 poise, Shard of Alexander, Ritual Sword and Shield Talisman, Melissen's Prosthesis, Stone Barb, Crack Tier, Faith Tier. Let's jump into stats. And for stats, we have 60 Vigor, 22 Mind again, 28 Endurance, 16 Strength, 75 Dexterity with Melissen's Prosthesis, 25 Faith with the Faith Tier. We're using Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength. You can also use Blood Boil with this build for 10% more damage too. This is definitely a hard-hitting one with the Sword Spear. And at number 3, we have the Bolt of Gransax, an incredibly powerful weapon from a distance. It has ridiculous range, and this is also a popular weapon too, doing pure lightning damage, and you can see the range on screen. It truly is incredible. This may be one of the only dragons that's not an ancient dragon that has decent lightning resistance. His actual resistances are really weird if you look up this dragon's resistances. Overall, he's kind of a pain to fight, as you can see on screen here. That being said, the Bolt of Gransax's range is absurd. You also have a lot of fun with this weapon. This is another weapon that's really fun to use because of the fact that you can buff up pure lightning damage and just have really fun with the Ash of War standing from a distance. Most bosses in the game you can hit from really far away with this, and it's incredible at sniping regular enemies too. Yeah, he did manage to hit me more than a few times, but we're going to be able to take this dragon out here in a second after he does his very obnoxious screaming move that does a lot of frost damage and a lot of damage as a whole. But he goes down. The Bolt of Gransax is still a very good weapon. Let's jump into equipment, stats, and everything you need to know for this one. For equipment, we have the Bolt of Gransax, preferably plus 10. Any seal for buffs will do. We hit 51 poise. You can check out the armor set there. We have the Shard of Alexander, Lightning Scorpion Charm, Ritual Sword and Shield Talisman, Lightning Tier, Faith Tier. Let's jump into stats for this build. For stats, we have 60 Vigor, 24 Mind, 28 Endurance, 16 Strength, 60 Dexterity. We have 33 Faith with the Faith Tier so that we can use Hellish Rebiri as well and generically boost the weapon art. We're also using Golden Vow. Overall, this is a very reliable and very strong weapon to use. Before we get into the big battle with the big dragon, we have at number 2, Double Slash, an incredibly reliable build as well. This one is actually an upgrade now from the Rivers of Blood, which has been nerfed around 5 times since launch. A Keen Nagakiba will actually beat it now with Blood Flame Blade. Yeah, the Rivers of Blood really isn't very relevant anymore. It's still a fun weapon to use, I guess, because it's cool looking, but it can be beat out by a Keen or even quality Nagakiba at higher levels. Let's jump into equipment. For equipment, we have the Keen Nagakiba with Double Slash using Blood Flame Blade. Any seal for buffs, we have the White Mask on, Shard of Alexander, Rotten Wing Sword Insignia, Melissen's Prosthesis, Lord of Blood's Exaltation, Thorny Tier, Faith Tier. Let's jump into stats for this build. And you don't need Hell for this one, so we have 60 Vigor, 22 Mind, 28 Endurance, 16 Strength, 75 Dexterity with Lissen's Prosthesis, 25 Faith with the Faith tier, which will make our levels add up to 160, by the way. We're using Golden Vow, Flame Grant Me Strength, and Blood Flame Blade to buff this double slash build. And at number 1, to no surprise for the people that follow my channel, we have Keen Guardian Sword Spear and Ice Spear. Now, Ice Spear has both intelligence and dexterity scaling and AR to a degree. You can put it on a Keen Sword Spear for a very good amount of damage, posture damage, and frost buildup. Now, granted, this is New Game Plus 7, and the big dragon here, who I always say his name wrong, Placidusax, Placidusa, however you say his name, he has 40% magic resistance. He's actually incredibly strong against frost, and on New Game Plus 7, believe it or not, he has around 200 poise. Which gives us a chance to show the reliability of Ice Spear, consistently getting, depending on resistances, between 1200 and 2200 damage, having at least 20 poise on each hit, and then the frost build-up makes this incredibly fun, versatile, and can add a lot to your dex build. On regular resistance enemies, in a couple of my videos, I did testing for Ice Spear. I used the Clayman's Harpoon and Magic Affinity, Cold Affinity, and then I used the Guardian Sword Spear in Magic and Cold, and found that the difference in dexterity is only about 50 damage less at rune level 150. Which goes to the point that Ice Spear does scale, in fact, with both dexterity and magic damage. At high levels, Cold Affinity is great because you can do both, and you can get a ridiculous amount of damage out of Ice Spear. And don't forget to comment your favorite weapon in Keen Affinity. I'm curious what weapons you run as a dexterity build in Keen Affinity and why you like that weapon the most. Now on New Game Plus 7, this is actually one of the hardest bosses in the game given his 40,000 HP and his ridiculous resistances. He's very strong versus all status effects. Having the 40% elemental resistances, he makes for a very tough fight if you're not using Bubbles or Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike. Yeah, if you're using the Envoy's Longhorn or Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike, it definitely simplifies this fight. Even on New Game Plus 7, that's probably the best method for most people, but I wanted to take on a tough boss with decent resistances, really good resistances with Ice Spear to show off how reliable it can be. Because I truly believe it's one of the most reliable builds in the entire game. That and Lion's Claw and Guts Greatsword are two of the most consistent builds for me in the entire game of Elden Ring, and honestly, they're two of my favorites as well. They can even be overpowered for a lot of bosses because they both do good posture damage also. You can even break Placidusax even with his 200 poise with Ice Spear. You can break a lot of bosses with Ice Spear, having consistently the ability to basically just spam the Ash of War for frost damage, magic damage, and posture damage. I also like having that option of having the magic damage here and then using the Bolt of Gransax for lightning damage and then switching to something like Spinning Weapon or Double Slash for physical damage and bleed, giving you a ton of versatility as a dexterity build. Yeah, as far as dexterity goes, it's really versatile. By the way, I mentioned that I'm going to be reorganizing the channel a bit. I'm going to do videos for each damage type, and I'm going to make it easier to find stuff on my channel too, and I'm even going to organize it so that when DLC arrives, you can easily find any of the builds you're looking for each damage stat. Because I feel like right now with some of the bigger list videos I do, it's a little bit difficult to find that build, and I know some people comment and they can't find or they're looking for a build, and then I end up having to find the build for them. So I'm going to try to reorganize the channel in a way that's a little bit more straightforward as we head into DLC. Which, if you may have guessed, I'm totally pumped and excited for. I watched the trailer 10, 15 times. I actually can't even count how many times now. It truly is it was an incredible trailer, honestly. It pumped me up a lot. I think it brought the community back a ton too, and I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be an amazing DLC, probably FromSoftware's best. Dark Souls 3 Ring City was my favorite, but I'm sure this DLC will surpass that. For equipment, we have the Keen Guardian Sword Spear. We're using Ice Spear with it. We have the Spellblade set, any seal for buffs, Shard of Alexander, Magic Scorpion Charm, Ritual Sword, and Shield Talisman, Magic Tier, Faith Tier. Let's jump into stats for this one. For stats, since we are using Howl, this is a different one, just like the Bolt of Gransax. 60 Vigor, 24 Mind, 28 Endurance, 16 Strength, 60 Dexterity, 23 Faith, 33 with the Faith tier. We're using Golden Vow and Hellish Fury to buff this. And if you're wondering why I'm showing stats of the ones that are the same, it's because you can easily use this timestamp if you're looking for a specific build, and then everything is there that you need. Thanks for watching this one. I hope you enjoyed my top 8 dexterity builds for Elden Ring. I optimized these for 60 Vigor and 51 Poise aside from the Ice Spear one because we're using the Spellblade set to boost the damage. Be sure to sub if you're enjoying my content. You're not going to want to miss out. I'm going to be covering a ton of Elden Ring as always. And be sure to check the description for ways to support the channel. People that are leaving supers, by the way, thank you. I'll be doing some more shout-outs for those. And be sure to check out my top 40 overpowered builds that should be out the day after this one.